Hi, this is the second part, Light Being, and this is the second part, WW3 Or Light Guidance. So, in the first video, I share some insights I gained through my experience and applied them to our external world, and how we respond and receive of that information and the actions that are resulting from the information, and our place within ourselves is what I'm trying to share there, because I make my videos ad lib. I don't tend to, sit and think in great detail about what I'm going to say. I have a general understanding of something that needs to be shared. So with this one is the guidance, because the last video ended, who shall care about a thought? And that's what we need to we need to question our thoughts, to learn to be objective and to be unbiased even within ourselves, to be able to understand that, yeah, actually this is bad, this is wrong, this is damaging, and somehow balance things out, to find valid justifications for living as we live. So, for example, we none of us particularly like the world that we're living in now, or even the jobs that we're forced to do, but we continue to do them because we have a plan, guidance, because we're moving into something else, and we are ready for change. You see, we are getting ourselves prepared mentally, psychologically, as well as physically, for major change and for establishing our will. Okay, not the will of the mighty, but the will of the righty, because that's the law. Right equals might, to do as thy will. And because we are right, we have the might. And the people, big and mighty people of this world today, who are giving themselves rights to do as thy will, just on the foundation of their might, which itself is founded on nothing but crime, lies, confusion. You see, that's why their will is dangerous. That is why they are stupid. And intelligence cannot survive on stupidity, because it fundamentally opposes the prime function of our being as a species on this planet, as human beings. That is our prime function, our intelligence, which ultimately is to be a benefit of life to Earth, of life on Earth, you see, not to be a disaster to it. And the life of this planet has been sacrificed enormously to raise us to this point where we are today. Just the other day I was watching a video of a film that was taken in Paris in the 1800s, the late 1800s. And I was absolutely shocked at the amount of horses, the amount of work that horses were doing, animals. Just pulling people around, literally. Where cars and buses and trams are today were horses, horse-drawn carriages, rammed with people. All day, up and down, up and down. Everywhere you looked, horses, horses. Where would we be without horses? Do you see what I mean? That we owe something to the life of this planet that we have used for our own purposes. And, let's face it, horses have had it really bad. They've had to ride into battle, carry men weighted down with armour and swords on their backs, and literally face the sword with us, and the fire and everything that gets thrown at them, through centuries and centuries of war. But you see, we don't think about these things because they aren't on the mainstream narrative, are they? Our thoughts are on a treadmill that is dictated to us by the likes of the BBC and Rupert Murdoch, and they're also cosy and comfortable in our homes right now. The TV in the corner with the BBC broadcaster all normal and telling us about World War III. You know, we're going in full out war with Iran now after Trump, for no reason whatsoever, has torn up the Iran peace treaty. And now has instigated this war. And Britain's going to follow suit. Oh, meanwhile, Boris Johnson is still off on holiday sunning himself with his latest fling. Jeremy Corbyn takes on the role of Prime Minister and makes an official statement in relation to what Trump's done. But our alleged real Prime Minister is where? You see. But we will accept all of that. We might grumble about it, but nobody's going to hear our grumbles. Nobody's going to hear our concerns. We will hear the grumbles, the concerns, the narrative, the debates through the TV, won't we? Through the mainstream media, and also through what we see on Twitter. But the point is that no matter how much we understand about what's going on and how much we're learning that then changes our understanding, we still need action, don't we? Where do we go with it? What do we do? How do we stop this? Well, the question we need to be asking ourselves is not how we can stop them, but is how we can start ourselves, you see. How do we progress? Forget about stopping them, because in the process of our own progression, we shall halt them in their tracks. Intelligence shall halt stupidity in its tracks. Because intelligence does, believe it or not, have the upper hand. Okay, even though stupidity right now is crowned president of the world. But the actual fact of universal reality is that intelligence does have the upper hand. And the way that we do it is not by being, anti this and anti that. It is by being pro. Okay? So we are pro-humanity. We're pro-humanity. We understand that we have grown up through centuries of judgments against our humanity. And now those judgments need to be delivered to where they actually originate, which is from the people, the consciousness right now in control of our planet. A consciousness that is stupid and, even as I've explained in the previous video, judged our children legally. I judged minor human beings, inferior, less unimportant, trivial human beings. Children, our children. And even successfully managed to persuade us all to just casually accept that. You see? And the weight of judgment that it carries with it. And the influence that weight of judgment then has on our own interactions within the world, and how the whole of society, it seems, can just turn a casual blind eye against what somebody like Jimmy Savile was doing for decades, and even stand by and watch the guy get a knighthood. But we live in such a world that when somebody like, for example, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford steps forward to explain the true nature of what is about to be given a seat on the Supreme Court of America, there she is next minute. She's still in hiding to this day in fear for her life. And the guy gets made Supreme Court judge anyway. That's the kind of world we are living in. So the only way forward is to think about, well, what can we actually do? So we stand up for our rights. We stand up for our human rights. There should be no homelessness in Britain. Every single person on this planet, every human being, every creature has a right to shelter. Now, the fact that England and many other nations like Britain are owned and controlled, and people don't have a right to just go and build themselves a little shelter here and there, then this government, the ruling power, has to make sure that everybody is housed. Not in a factory prison, in their own homes. Because we also have a right to dignity. We have a right to food, fuel, legal assistance. We have rights. So we stand up for our rights. We demand that the people of Britain, the homeless people of Britain, are homed, that they all receive shelter. We demand that the legal definition of minor against a child is erased. Developing human being is a child. That's the legal definition, developing human being. We demand an end to prohibition. We demand investment into hemp, the miracle crop that actually cleans soil. It actually removes toxins from the soil. 50,000 uses and benefits of hemp. Okay. With investment into hemp industry, Britain, well, would not only become a forerunner of the world in hemp technology, it's eco-friendly. We could provide all our needs from hemp. Clean our soil. And why is it banned? Well, we know why it was banned. It was about protecting the plastics industry. The oil men had suddenly found something to do with their headache oil waste that's highly toxic, and they were storing massive quantities of it as they were making gas for cars. So, they found something to do with it, and then all of a sudden state-funded scientists, American scientists, found out you could make biodegradable plastics from hemp, and then suddenly hemp was a threat, and also a threat to a media mogul, the Rupert Murdoch of his day, William Randolph Hearst, who owned most of American media at that time in terms of newspapers and magazines. Well, he just spent how much on buying up thousands of acres of Mexican forest and investing in the latest wood pulp mills to make his paper for selling his magazines and newspapers, thinking he's very clever. And then suddenly in come American scientists announcing you can make 4 times as many paper that doesn't even need anything like as much bleaching and lasts longer on hemp. An acre of hemp will produce as much paper as 4 acres of trees. You get four times as much paper from an acre of hemp than you do from an acre of trees, and it's renewable every 3 months. Oh, suddenly, where's William Randolph Hearst with all the money that he's borrowed and invested into his paper mills and buying up his thousands of acres of Mexican forest. Where is DuPont with their non-biodegradable oil waste-based plastics? Hemp was a threat, too much to be ignored. It was going to actually enrich the general public. So they decided to ban marijuana as an illegal drug, the sativa-rich variety of hemp, because industrial hemp is not rich in THC. You see, because there are different varieties of hemp. They're all the same plant, but in the sativa varieties, you get the THC, the mind-altering substances, the chemicals in them. And because they're all identical to look at, generally, apart from hemp tends to grow a bit taller and is a bit more thinned out. It's not as thick and bushy. But, you know, it was decided that because once they'd criminalised marijuana, the sativa variety of hemp, then they could impose a heavy tax on industrial hemp, because it was argued that people growing hemp could also be growing an illegal crop, which would be difficult to police, and thereby earning themselves extra money. So in order to inhibit that, then put a huge tax on hemp. So it made it commercially unviable. Hemp became commercially unviable. Many people do not know that South Africa, for example, was banned from growing hemp in order to receive money from the IMF. One of the stipulations is that they agree not to grow hemp. The same happened, I think, in Bangladesh. Caused major soil erosion within a couple of years, because people were suddenly banned from growing hemp. They had to grow other things instead because of the stipulations in IMF, the International Monetary Fund. The stipulations in it. There's been a war against hemp going on for a long, long time, and it is our right, because we're talking about the tree of life. It is a tree of life. It caters to our needs. We have an almost symbiotic physical brain function with it, because we have we have receptors in the brain, cannabinoid receptors, which are specifically designed, you know, to respond to THC in marijuana. And they actually grow with use. We've been using this plant for thousands upon thousands and thousands of years, for medicines, for making our clothes, for all kinds of uses. You can see they're all there. And there's 50,000 uses and benefits and more that we can extract, utilise from hemp. So we need to demand that. We need to demand that our country now, or do it ourselves, find land, grow our own hemp, invest, find investments, set up our own factories, take proposals to banks, ask them for the cash, the investments. We need to do it. Do it through crowdfunding. Governments pick up on it. So, but it's all going to be very difficult to do anything, isn't it, when you've got no rights? When you live in, like, for example, in Britain right now, we're being governed by a criminal cabal, strongly suspected of being in on yet another rigged election, who've just lied to people, ridden roughshod, even over Parliament, our rights. they fully intend to scrap our human rights as soon as we're out of the EU, because they can't do it while we're in the EU, you see, because we have our human rights protected by the EU, because it is a fundamental feature of being a member of the EU, is that you have to uphold human rights. And so that is why we know Boris Johnson will be taking us out on a hard Brexit, because he wants to scrap our human rights, and precisely so that we never have a chance to establish our will, so that we live under the will of criminals. Stupidity. Now, another way, a guiding way, is to use the power of the law and to use the power of the rights that we have at our disposal right now. Because rights and laws are like muscles, and if you fail to use them, you will grow weak. We all know, you know, if you want muscles, if you want to be strong, then you have to use your muscles regularly. If you fail to use your muscles, you're going to get weaker and weaker and weaker. And people who are creating their own laws, building their own muscles on the strength of laws that are actually established to facilitate crime and protect criminals, well, they're going to get stronger and stronger and stronger, aren't they? And that is exactly where we are in the world today. So, you know, you take courage from the light of what the light teaches you. You hold faith in what you know, not in what you're told to believe, but in what you know. You believe what you know, that's your faith, and your faith of the universal intelligence, the light within you. And then you start applying it to the world, don't we? So, like I say, you support, you have demands. You demand an end to prohibition. It's creating crime and criminals and funding a whole criminal underworld that is wreaking havoc, and it has wreaked havoc on our whole financial system that's fundamentally corrupted through laundering. And then that has emboldened all kind of other criminals on the periphery of that. So here in Britain, yes, we need to apply the law, and we need to take it to EU Parliament. So, you know, I've spent time doing this, which is a legal argument, basically telling it like it is, probably a bit too hot to handle for some, because, you know, as I say at the end here, and meanwhile, the Zionists get to complete their Greater Israel project, minus any credible voice of dissent, you know, which is the rock bottom reality of what is going on in the Middle East right now. Because nobody wants to talk about the elephant in the room. Well, we are going to need to talk about the elephant in the room. And actually, it's not an elephant, it's a monster. And we do have laws and powers to arrest it. Because we, in our knowledge, our self-understanding, our knowledge of the universe, need to get strong. Strong in the light. You see, the light shines through darkness. The light will shine through the eye of a needle. But these people cannot pass through the eye of a needle, because their thoughts have no light. Because their thoughts, their judgments, their actions are not coming from any genuine, lawfully recognised reality of this universe. They are all the products of a fiction. And that's basically what Brexit is. The referendum itself is a product of a fiction. The result of the first referendum is a product of a fiction. Why should we now have had this second election thrust upon us by Boris Johnson, purely over the issue of Brexit, that apparently by now the majority of the country we know does not want, and yet we're being asked to accept that nonetheless we voted in that buffoon by a landslide. Judge ourselves stupid, and just, you know, oh well, all have a grumble on Twitter about it, go on a few demos, no, we don't want war with Iran. War with Iran is all part of it, because let's face it, if Jeremy Corbyn was in, Britain wouldn't be any part of this war with Iran, would we? But with Netanyahu popping over to see Boris Johnson regularly, you know, Trump, his friendship with Trump, of course. Oh, British warships are there already. So, you know, we need to understand there's a level of urgency here. And we need to lose our inferiority complex and stand up righteously for what is right. So, yes, we say no to war with Iran. And one of the ways of making sure that we don't go to war with Iran is by getting this Brexit issue sorted out, and by going to EU Parliament and demanding that they support a second referendum now, and that it is closely monitored by the EU and the UN, and that the EU itself makes sure that the British people are fully informed about what we're voting for or what we're voting against. And then if we choose to leave the EU, it will be with a favourable deal, because we are not going to vote to suffer the kind of punishment that criminal nations get on being kicked out of the EU, because we are not a criminal. The British public are not a criminal. We have not behaved criminally to the EU. That would be our government. Alleged government. Cabal is what they are. So you see what I mean? Is that we have to support something. So I'm asking British people, get behind this. Get behind the question about the rigged election. Demand legal action. Demand that the EU supports us. But I've explained here that the EU has a duty of care, even to protect the social minority groups now at risk in Britain, the children of Britain now at risk, at a known risk, identified by the UN. Trafficked children are at risk coming into Britain. Britain receives thousands every year. The poor, the vulnerable, the people who've been lied to, persuaded to vote against their own best interests. Even in this general election, they've been lied to. The opposition has been very poorly presented. Jeremy Corbyn has been, well, it was just literally all-out war against him, wasn't it? All-out war against the man. And yet to witness the thousands of people everywhere he went that came out. We cannot let that go. We cannot let our understanding, our care, our compassion go. We need to stand up for it, because our children, literally our children's futures, are depending on what we here in the here and now do today. And, you know, I do bring spirituality into my work. I do face reality. I do face where a lot of this hostility, this negativity is coming from, because we are being engineered towards satisfying what they call a higher objective. Which is the Greater Israel Project. Because, you know, as I've stated before, there's no other explanation for it. For what's going on. The madness of it all. The insanity. The insanity of borrowing money to fight ridiculous, useless wars. So, you know, standing up against them, we need to stand up for. Here, stand up for our rights. We have a right to a second referendum. We have a right to demand an end to prohibition. We've got the law, the reason, the logic to support us, the evidence of the crime and harm that prohibition is causing. We have a right to stand up to remove the taxes from hemp and the ban against marijuana. We have a right to demand that this crop is utilised, that investment is poured into developing it in every nation. Because it just so happens that every aspect, even of making these products from hemp, is eco-friendly. A lot more eco-friendly than the process of making, say, plastics out of oil waste. And we can see the damage that those plastics are doing to our ocean, to the food chain. It's getting into the food chain, and through that, getting into us. It's really serious. But, oh, trivial. Because, you know, what's important is who's carrying guns in this world and who's aiming them at who. And, you know, what is the purpose? Oh, Islam's coming to take us all over. Is it really? So the only thing that we can do is, like I say, act. We need to actually do something. Our thoughts, our understanding, we need to support something. And so I'm asking people to support hemp, to support an end to prohibition, and to, in Britain here, support the motion for a second referendum, which I think Britain is a key nation in this world at the moment, and what happens here has major implications on the rest of the world. And as you can see, we're witnessing that already with this war, upcoming war now against Iran. And Britain does have a huge naval military, as it were. So, you know, it is very, very, very serious. What happens in Britain does have a very serious impact on the rest of the world, and that's why it is so important that we call out this government on the knowledge, on the evidence of rigging, that it is arrested, suspended. We suspend this government until that is sorted out, and we ask the EU to oversee a second referendum on whether or not we leave Brexit with a deal or choose to remain. We are not going to have a hard Brexit. And from there, explain to Parliament how we, the British people, feel about whether or not we want to go to war with Iran. We are not going to be dragged into another war against actually innocent people and children. We are not going to take part in inflicting more damage in the Middle East on the strength of political shenanigans of a set of criminals, because that's what they are, that are instigating these wars, that are participating in them. I mean, apart from defence, why, what are these wars really about? Very, very strongly, we know. So, you know, that is my guidance to people that we can actually do. And the other guidance is think about going vegetarian, think about actually going vegan, because we are as we eat.